So thanks very much everyone for coming along to this seminar today. This is obviously not the usual seminar that we would have, talking about photovoltaics or renewable energy. The idea behind this seminar, a few years ago, Mark ran a seminar that was similar to this, about safe cycling to work, to come to the university. That was, and its aim was to, I suppose, promote cycling and help people do it safely and have an enjoyable time. Our interest is promoting cycling and getting more people on the road, but we want you to be confident in doing it. So hopefully this presentation today gives you some tips and helps encourage you to give cycling to work and elsewhere in your life a try. The idea today is we're going to give a seminar, but please stop us at any point if you have any questions. We'll sort of stop around the end of every slide and just ask if anyone has any questions. So feel free to put your hand up, ask away. You know, it's not an academic seminar. It's really much more about advocating cycling and cycling safety in particular. So thanks for coming. I did send along an email that has a lot of the information from the slides today, a lot of the links and so on, and some other supplementary stuff, useful websites and so on for your reference. So you can check that out during the presentation or at your own leisure. So just a brief overview of today's presentation. First of all, why should you commute by bicycle? Talk a bit about the barriers and challenges to cycle commuting, and those are either perceived challenges or real challenges. Some of the demographics and risk and the relationship between those things. Then go through some of the basic cycling equipment that you might need to get out on the road, some defensive cycling techniques and philosophies, common hazards that you might face when you're on the road, rules and responsibilities about road use, and then we'll go through some common cycling situations and talk about how to deal with them in a safe and effective manner. And then some stuff on security and repair around your bike too, which is ultimately, if your bike is broken or stolen, then you're not going to be doing much cycling. So why commute by bicycle? First of all, perhaps most obviously, cycling is good for your health. You get exercise and it's free exercise. So no one charges you to get on your bike. And if you're commuting, then it's time that you would have been spending commuting anyway. So you save that time later when you might have gone to the gym to get that amount of exercise. You also save money. So there are no parking fees around cycling. You don't have to pay insurance until Alan Jones gets his way. There's no petrol, obviously. You might eat more food than you would otherwise. No green slips, and so on. And it's a great way to enjoy the outdoors. Despite what you may hear about Sydney as a cycling city, I think it's a great city for cycling in. There could be some improvements. Here's a view from my daily ride. And Mark rides over that bridge there every day. So you can really get out and see beautiful things that you would otherwise take for granted in Sydney. You can actually save time by riding a bike. For me, if I were to take public transport from my house, it would take me an hour to get to uni. But on my bike, it takes me 25 to 30 minutes, which is hard to argue with. And of course, the thing that draws us all here to work at UNSW, you can save the planet. Cycling is an almost zero net carbon emitting form of travel. It's also good for your mental health. You don't have to sit in traffic. You can go around the traffic. You don't have to wonder where your bus is or try to cram yourself onto a packed train. And just the act of cycling and exercise helps you process things in your day. It's a great way to deal with mental health issues. And you also find cool stuff on the side of the road. This is one of the best parts of cycling. For example, I found this hat. It was in pretty good condition. So what are some of the barriers and challenges to cycle commuting? I mean, those are all the obvious good things about it. So first of all, there's a perception that cycling is a risky activity. And indeed, you do encounter quite a few hazards as you're cycling. So first of all, separated cycling infrastructure where cyclists are completely isolated from traffic is quite rare in Sydney. Now in Northern Europe, for example, you find quite a lot of separated cycleways. But in Sydney, there is not very much separated infrastructure completely. Often it's sort of commingled, if there is any infrastructure at all. Motorists can also have in Sydney in particular, a somewhat aggressive sense of their entitlement to the road. So the sense that they belong there and you don't. And some motorists act on that in a way that feels threatening to cyclists, and that's a legitimate concern. Cyclists, sort of connected to that, is the sense that cyclists feel invisible when they're on the road. That, you know, there's a danger of a motorist feeling aggressive toward the cyclist, but there's also a danger that the motorist doesn't even notice the cyclist, and that's a real issue. The risk is also quite one-sided when you're on a bike. By that I mean cyclists are completely exposed, whereas someone in a car will never be injured by a cyclist. The cyclist is the one who would get injured in the case of an altercation between a motorist and a cyclist, unless it becomes a fist fight, in which case you've got a chance. There are also perceptions that cycling is somehow inconvenient or it's quite difficult compared to, like, driving yourself or taking public transport. So first of all, that sort of thing is actually enhanced by poor infrastructure and the accessibility that cyclists are provided by the built environment. There's also obviously, potentially some physical difficulty involved getting up hills, if your route is particularly bad, dealing with a long distance, and so on. Weather is something that you have to contend with when you're a cyclist in a way that you might not if you were driving your own car. And of course, there's the question of time. How long does it take you to get to work or do the other things that you would do in your life? There's some mechanical issues as well. My bike doesn't work. I don't know that I'd be able to fix a flat, and so on. Those are what I consider mechanical issues. And then there are simply cultural and aesthetic barriers. If you never see someone riding a bike that looks like you might think that's not an activity for you. And you see these things play out in the demographics of cycling. Also, if you just think that that's not a suitable activity for an adult, then that potentially would keep you from getting on a bike. So what we're really trying to do is combat all of these notions to a greater or lesser extent. Some things you have to deal with. Weather, sorry, if it rains, it rains. But things like cultural barriers are something that you can challenge. So I mentioned demographics. Cycling rates in Australia, when compared to global standards, so that includes other developed countries and developing countries, are quite low. In particular, they're lower for women than for men in every age group. So that's to say that for every age group, 10, 15-year age group, women ride at a lower rate than men. So that's something that we as cyclists have to help combat. And I've attached this report that I referred to there, the National Cycling Participation Survey, to that email. There is a notion of a hypothetical ridership. So this is how ridership breaks down from the perspective of people like council planners, like urban planners. There's a notion that 10% of people would cycle under any conditions. So, despite, or with the exception of maybe it being 50 degrees outside, these people would ride in bad weather, any infrastructure, they would ride on the road, they would ride happily if there was, a lot of traffic. So in a sense, council planners don't worry about those people. They can do a terrible job and those people will still ride. There are 20% of people that will never ride. They think cyclists are morons. For whatever reason, they'll never get on a bike, or they simply can't. They might not be physically capable of riding a bicycle. The vast majority, 70%, from the council perspective, may ride if, and only if, the perceived risk of the activity is very low, among a few other things. But that's really the key. So a planner who's sympathetic towards cyclists and want to encourage cyclists to ride, focus on this group of people. The people that their ridership depends on what the urban planner does, and the transport planner. That is also who we're trying to reach with this presentation. If you're already riding your bike and you would ride no matter what we have to say today, then great. If you're never going to ride, it says in the holy book, don't ride, then you're not going to ride. Go enjoy some lunch. Or sit and enjoy the talk because you might learn something as a motorist. But it's those people that are sort of on the edge, trying to decide whether to ride or not, who we're trying to address. So the big question is here, what can cyclists do? We're not transport planners. We may be activists and try to improve things from a transport perspective or from an infrastructure perspective. But what can cyclists do as bike users and members of the community and people out in traffic do to minimize the risk and the other challenges that we're faced with when we go out on the road? So first of all, cycling equipment is a critical part of how you get out on the road and determines the nature of your experience. So having the right equipment is important. Yeah. So Mark's got his machine over here today. So first of all, a bike. Now a lot of people might say, I don't have a suitable bike, or I don't have a bike at all. The statistics say that 55% of Australian households have at least one bike in working order, so that's good. You've already got quite a lot of people that have a bike that might not necessarily use one. The average Australian household has 1.5 bicycles in working order, which is interesting. And there are a lot of resources available to help you get your bike in good shape if it's been sitting unused for a while or it's sort of inherently a piece of junk. You don't have to go buy a new bicycle necessarily in order to get out on the road. Even then, it's easy to find a used bike for a good price. Now, Mark's got a good bike that's set up for city riding here, that even includes front shocks for going up and down stairs, and is nice and dirty as a bike should be. Mark, do you want to add anything about your bike itself?
Not really. I think Craig makes a pretty good point. Pretty much any bike can get you to and from.
This is for the microphone.
Any bike can get you to and from work, and then there's little things you can do just to make it much easier to ride. So getting the load off your back, out of a backpack onto a rack, makes riding much nicer as well, and it makes it so you can maybe carry a laptop or something heavy, or you can stop and do some grocery shopping on the way home. Having a bottle cage on there makes it so you can go a bit further and have something to drink along the way. And just the position on the bike might make you inclined to ride or not, because it's a bit too hard and is sore, or it's just easy and laid back. And so all these things are a factor. But any bike you've got, you can ride in, assuming it's got some basic things that were required by law to have on a bike. So things like a bell. We need front and rear lights that must be in use if we're riding at night. What else have we got that's mandatory? Then it's clothing stuff, so helmet, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. So more on the clothing. Clothing is important. You don't have to wear spandex, although Mark looks quite good in his spandex there. You can wear fairly ordinary clothes to ride a bicycle. However, there's some important things you have to consider when you're choosing clothing for cycling. First of all is protection from weather. On a nice day, you can wear pretty much whatever. On a wet day, you might want to wear something that would be protect you from rain. Don't forget about sun protection in the summertime. Protection from pavement, so wearing gloves is important. I remember that when Mark gave his previous presentation, he said something that stuck with me, which is that if he goes out for milk, he might not even wear a helmet, but he'll put on gloves. And that's because even a small prang, like falling off of your bike and landing on your hands, will wreck your life for a couple of weeks as your hands heal. You can scrape your knees, scrape your elbows. It's not that bad. You'll go back to work the next day. But if you destroy your hands, it's very difficult to lead an ordinary life. So I make sure I always have a pair of gloves on. There are other advantages to wearing gloves too, but to me that's the most important thing is protection from the pavement if you do happen to come across the pavement in an adverse way. Also, visibility is a critical aspect of choosing the right cycling clothing. So here's my wife Jen wearing a very nice new jacket that she's got, which is very visible. So first of all, it's a bright color. It's not an unfashionable color like this vest I've got on, for example. But it's a cycling jacket, and so it incorporates some reflective elements as well as the bright color. So you can see that there are these reflective stripes up and down the arms, and on the back there are reflective strips. This is not too expensive of a garment, and is going to be very useful for her in her cycling career. And it's even got a nice little pocket back here for storing, if you're just going out with just your jacket, you can stick your some money in there or your card or whatever. Also important is the helmet, which Mark already mentioned. Any helmet you buy in Australia pretty much will be according to the Australian standard. Really the difference is in fashion and weight and other things. Eyewear is also important. I just wear an ordinary set of sunglasses when I ride my bike. At night, something that people don't often think about is eyewear at night. But it's even important to have eyewear at night because it protects you from bugs or other things flying into your eyes. So often I'll wear just a pair of safety goggles, like a pair of lab safety goggles or workshop goggles at night to protect my eyes. I think Mark maybe has some specialty cycling optics.
Oh yeah, it varies. I often scratch up one and then change up to something else.
Yeah.
One thing I'm going to point out about helmets is it's really common to buy bike bits overseas because it's a cheap way to get them, and I often do that. But there's a few things I say go to a bike shop to buy, and helmet's one of them, and shoes is another, and the bike itself is the third thing I'd say go to a bike shop for. And the reason is helmets. You might buy exactly the same helmet you can buy in a bike shop from overseas, and it won't have the sticker on it saying it meets Australian standards. It's the same helmet, so functionally it's doing the same thing, but if something happens where your equipment is being checked, then you are no longer riding with an Australian standard helmet. So, and the second reason for doing it is the reason I want you to do buy the other things in a bike shop is because it's one of the few things where fit is really important. Helmet and shoes, just go into a bike shop, try them on and pay the extra $20 there, because they're providing you that excellent service of being able to check that it fits first, and then it'll work, because you can save $20 on a helmet and then have an uncomfortable helmet for the next 5 years, or you can just spend an extra $20 and get one that really works well for you. Same with your shoes, and really important with a bike too, because the geometry of a bike is the difference between really enjoying your bike and having sore knees or a sore back every time you go riding. So they're the three things I'd say go to a bike shop to get sorted out.
Yeah, great. One other thing is lights. As Mark mentioned, it's required by law to have suitable lights. So this is a typical sort of just a battery operated LED light. It's the sort of thing that wasn't really available 10 years ago, but now is ubiquitous and cheap. They're really handy. They just mount on your handlebars, or a rear light like this. This is a USB rechargeable rear light. These are $40 now. You don't even have to pay that much. These are Australian design. I've even stuck one in my helmet. Did that work? Yeah, so Mark and I were talking about this. Neither one of us really has a light on our helmet, but this increases your visibility remarkably. From this being on your handlebars to this being up on your helmet, it's a half meter difference, and that's often where cars can see you. So having something in your helmet is really easy.
Mentioned last week I was riding home on my road bike. I usually ride this, but the road bike's a bit quicker and a bit more fun. And I had this same light on the front of my road bike here. This is the one. It's quite bright for its size in terms of getting in people's eyes. But 4 intersections in a row, someone pulled across me having not seen me, even though I had the flashing light. And the reason for that is I've got stocks up on the bike where my hands sit, and the light's down here. So the only cone where people can see me is right in front of the bike. And you've really got to think about not just, there's a bright light out the front, but are people going to be able to see me from different directions? And you can do things like the sides of some of the bikes will have white sections, but you can get that really reflective, almost iridescent type tape that looks just plain in normal daylight, but once you put it on the side, it really lights up. Think about these things, and putting a light on the helmet's fantastic, because if someone seems like they're pulling out and you look in their direction, that's exactly where your light's going to go, and it's going to be really obvious to them that you are there. So I don't have one on my helmet yet, just because I haven't gotten to the bike shop to get one since last week when that stuff was happening, and I realised how bad it is, and particularly in the middle of winter when there's a bit of rain about, visibility is quite low during that time.
Yeah. There's also the sort of step up from the battery operated light is a dynamo powered light. So this is my wife Jen's bike, which is equipped with this light here, which is powered by a dynamo in the hub. So you never have to worry about recharging batteries. It's always works as long as you're moving, and even has some staying power after you stop moving. So just quickly, check the time.
Has anyone got any questions?
Yeah,
By the way, we said
please. I said we were going to stop, but we didn't. All right, so just go quickly into some a discussion of defensive cycling. So defensive cycling is just like defensive driving. Now, I know I had to take a defensive driving course when I was learning to drive, and it's the same mindset, effectively. It's a set of cycling behaviors and techniques that anticipate common hazards and provides you with time to manage those hazards. So the first thing that I can really think of when I think of defensive cycling is that you never give a motorist the benefit of the doubt. Which means that if a motorist is moving and they're meant to stop, they've been signaled to stop either by a red traffic light or a stop sign, you never assume that they're going to stop. You wait for that motorist to stop before you move out in front of the motorist. Now that's just an example, a very basic example of defensive cycling. But another example might be to pay attention not only to what the car in front of you is doing, but the car 2 or 3 cars ahead of you is doing. Because obviously there will be a flow-on effect. If that car stops suddenly and the other cars behind it stop, you have to be prepared to stop or to change direction or whatever it might be. These are actually quite simple things to do, and honestly, if you have been driving for a while, they just become sort of second nature, but they become that much more important when you're riding a bike. You're not just protecting your insurance rating or whatever it might be, you're actually protecting your life, even in slow-moving scenarios. So it's critical to pay attention to what drivers are doing because they may help you anticipate some hazardous behavior. So here's a good example that Mark sent me. Hopefully this will work. Control click. So I'll just start that over. So this is, looks like it's on the, okay, so here's a cyclist riding behind like a taxi, and you see the taxi took a left turn but didn't indicate. So that would tell me this might not be a very good driver. So I'll give this person a bit of space, and what do you know? Pulled over across the cyclist's path without indicating, clearly without looking.
San Francisco is a great
And you may also notice that the
keeps getting better.
I don't want to hear about
To
the
get
set.
around
This is good.
town, here's what you need to know about the rules of the road.
That the car actually had a tail light out as well. So there was a whole set of issues with that driver in that car that it certainly paid off for that cyclist to be a bit suspicious of or aware that that car might make an erratic move. Somebody add to that, Mark?
Yeah. So, and a lot of my riding over time, you don't start by being brilliant at it, and you're going to need to observe how people behave around you and start learning a skill set in terms of how to anticipate. And it's the same with driving. The sooner you get better at keeping the head up and looking what's going on ahead of you rather than the road right down in front of you, the better you'll ride. Same goes with riding off-road. The further up the track you look, the more time you've got to make decisions about what's coming at you. So the key principle is look beyond just what's right in front of you, and that will help you anticipate. And anytime you're near a car and it starts slowing down a little, assume they're about to do something even if there's no indicator. That's the biggest thing for me. Anytime a car starts slowing down when I'm not expecting them to do something, they're about to do something. And so that's where you pull back and you just watch. And I've often followed other cyclists where I see something's about to happen and I kind of have to yell out to them because they're not figuring it out. And then next thing a car's just going straight across them. It's really common. So just, pay attention to what cars ahead are doing, and when a car around you starts slowing down, assume they're about to do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've found that looking at where drivers look can be really useful.
Yeah. That's right. So for you, those of you following along at home, Ned just pointed out that if you can see where a driver is looking, you can actually get a sense of what they're paying attention to. So I find that I'm often trying to make eye contact with drivers as a way to reassure myself that they can see me. So that is very important. And that's one of the reasons I don't like tinted windows is because you have no idea what a driver is doing, what they're paying attention to. So it's also important as a part of defensive cycling to be predictable yourself. So don't ride your bike like a bad driver. This will actually help prevent you from getting injured. It's important to remember that. So first of all, it's important to signal turns in advance so the drivers know that you're going to turn or stop. So in Australia, it's very simple. I'm going to make a left turn. I'm going to make a right turn. Elsewhere in the world, they might tell you if you're going to, so in the US, if you're riding in the right lane, you're going to make a right turn, you do this, but I don't see, that's extremely confusing. So it's very simple, right turn, left turn. If you need to signal you're going to stop, you might do so, but I think for most people they just simply stop. Try to avoid swerving or stopping suddenly. I know that's not always possible, but just remember that there are cars around you that might not be expecting you to do that, and you may actually have less space than you think. It's also important to ride in such a fashion that you can be seen. So I think that a lot of people's tendency, people that don't feel confident about riding in traffic, try to stay as far from the moving cars as possible. But often that puts them in a zone that is full of other hazards, and actually hazards that are potentially more dangerous, like colliding with a stationary object, such as the door of a car that opens suddenly into your path, or hitting a pedestrian that's stepping out from between cars, or simply being in a place that a driver can't see you and then suddenly you pop out into their direction of movement. So it's important to ride out of what we call the door zone, which if you imagine a line of parked cars and I'm riding between the line of parked cars and a line of traffic, someone were to simply open their door, there's a meter which I can easily be caught if they haven't checked their mirrors before they get out of the car. So I think a good rule of thumb is to ride on the white line, which separates the moving traffic from the parking area. That usually gives you enough space to be able to move and react quickly to a door being suddenly opened. And also, to go back to somewhat to Ned's point, if you check those parked cars as you go, to see whether there's someone in that car that might get out abruptly. Or if you see a parked car with a tail light on, it may be someone that just arrived and is about to leave their car.
It also aids people trying to get out of a car. If you're hugging the door zone and someone looks through their mirror, they can often try and do their best to see if anyone's coming, have a quick look in their mirror and maybe look over their shoulder, but then still not see you and open their door suddenly because they thought they've done the right thing. So the big point I make about all of this is you need drivers, pedestrians, everyone to consider you a vehicle, not a pedestrian. So if you're in close to cars, you're telling the cars next to you, I'm a pedestrian too, and just come past me quickly, I'm not in the way. We want to be respectful of other drivers and not get in their way, but we also want them to treat us like a vehicle. So if we're out on the white line or just the first metre of the lane, that says to them, I'm still a vehicle, I'm not trying to really get in your way, but actually go around me if you need to get around. And what ends up happening, the studies show that basically if you stay in close, cars go past you faster, but if you go out a bit, they'll actually give you space and then go around at a safer speed around you if you actually take a position on the road that says I'm a vehicle. It feels a bit more daunting if you haven't done much riding on the road because you feel like you're out in the danger zone, but it's actually making life way safer for you because people are seeing you from a much further distance and you've got a better chance that a door won't open on you as well. And people will be more respectful in trying to go around you as well.
Yeah. It's important to ride, this seems obvious, but ride in the same direction as the car traffic. There are some one-way streets in Sydney that it's simply dangerous to ride the wrong way down a one-way street, unless you're provided a suitable infrastructure for doing that, which I'll get to. So any questions about that defensive cycling stuff? Okay. Now, Mark, would you like to start talking about some common hazards on the road? Maybe I'll give you the microphone.
Stand in.
All right.
So,
Oh, yeah.
biggest one, motorist expectations and judgment. So, particularly in Sydney, it's not just at cyclists. In general, motorists in Sydney learn a culture of each other that driving is frustrating and I should be frustrated when I'm in my vehicle.
I'll bring it up over here.
And so if you look anything different to a car, then you're even more frustrating. And couple that with the Australian mentality of fairness, it feels kind of unfair that maybe I'm sitting in traffic waiting and someone else is skipping through. That's not fair. That's kind of a bit of mentality that sits in with Australians in general. So we as cyclists need to remember we're trying to build a rapport and build a respect with each other by showing motorist respect. we still have some rights to pass on the left of stationary traffic and move faster where it's safe to do so, but where we don't want to create anger or further anger with other road users. So we're trying to do that in a way that is respectful of it, but also taking advantages of the things that cycling offers us. So remember, you are entitled to do these things, but respect the people around you when you're doing it. So yes, you can take a whole lane and you can ride two abreast and take a whole lane. But if it's a single lane road and there's enough room in the verge to just ride that, then why be out in the road unless you need to for your own safety? But equally, remember, if it is stationary traffic and it's heavily congested, this thing of not liking cyclists there because it's unfair is actually working against the motorist stuck in congested traffic. Because the reason why it's congested is their mode of transport takes up heaps of square metres per person. So the rate at which you can move people through a city environment is much slower if people are using cars. So the best thing that they can do is make it as a friendly environment for as many cyclists to be there, as many pedestrians, bus users, train users to be in that city environment, and then there's less cars there and their trip is quicker. So we're helping decongest the city by making it safer and friendly to do it, and try and communicate that with people when you're talking to people about cycling. Why do it? Should they be allowed there? Say, well, yes, we're helping make your journey quicker. Don't get too angry at us. We're just trying to get home like you. And so, yeah, when it comes to cyclists and motorists, I'm constantly on a mission to build respect. So that's where stopping at stop signs, coming to a complete stop at a stop sign, even though many car drivers don't do that. Not going through red lights, even though you feel like you can make a safe judgment to do that too. Because rules aren't just there because we're trying to manage people so they don't hurt themselves. It's also the way that we communicate to the people around us. I don't think I'm above the law. I think I've got the same level of importance as everyone else does here. I respect you, so I'm going to respect the rules. So speeding through traffic lights because it's a bit quicker might be convenient, but every time you do that, you're communicating, I think I'm more important than you, and I don't have to follow the rules like you. And that doesn't cut it in Australia, where fairness is really important as well. So obey those rules and create that positive energy. And when someone sees you and does the right thing, or they go to open a door but then they see you and they keep it closed, give them a thank you when you do that, so you're building that rapport and their desire to have you there.
Do you want to do this?
Yep.
That's that link. So
Yep.
as a demonstration of what the psychological impacts of expectation are, like we sort of point to in that first point, that motorist expectations and judgment are themselves a hazard.
Oh, you're going to change
This,
that?
yeah, this one's got some sound. So
Some of you might have seen
yeah,
this
you may
one.
have seen this before.
The monkey
This is a thing called the
business
monkey
illusion.
business illusion.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
So everyone count. How many times the players wearing white pass the ball? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I think it's 15.
The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
So I think you get why this is important in that one of the things that happens for motorists, and it's a really, really common thing I see all the time, is one, motorists just don't see the cyclists at all, and that includes cyclists who are wearing high visibility gear. Or two, once they've passed a cyclist, they kind of think of them like a pedestrian. They're just gone out of the universe the second I've got my nose of the car in front of them. Now, this is because our brains process heaps of visual information, and we need to be good at recognising the most important information, discarding the rest to make good decisions. But that plays against us as cyclists, because for a car driver, the most important visual information is the other big dangerous cars around them that could hurt them. And everything else is of less importance because they're not really at risk from cyclists or pedestrians in the same way. Apart from if they hit a pedestrian, they might get charged by the law. So this is where there's some conditioning in terms of the learning that goes on, that you're not allowed to, got to always give way to pedestrians, you'll always be at fault if you hit one. And this is starting to come in with cyclists with metre and metre and a half passing laws, which have recently come in as well. But just know that most drivers' brains are filtering us out as cyclists. They're not really seeing us, and we're having to do things to make ourselves more obvious to be seen at all. So that's to do with our position on the road, the clothing we wear, the lights we use. It's not just because it's the law, we're doing it because they're the things that help drivers also see us as well. So yeah, poor infrastructure. We've got a bunch of examples here. There's a really good example of what you might call a fake bike zone just along Doncaster Road. Some of you might have seen where you've got the lines painted out from the car doors. Some sections are green as well, and some signage saying cyclists along there. Now, it's kind of that first step that city planners use to kind of get a bit of something going for cyclists when they don't really have the money to do anything better. But unfortunately, it often increases the danger for cyclists, because what ends up happening is it's enticing cyclists to ride in that car door zone we're talking about. And it's doubly dangerous because as a motorist, when you pull over into that zone, you've just got this mental expectation that this zone next to me is safe to open my door because there's no cars there. So people, I find, much more often just quickly open their door without checking in those zones with the painted cycle zones next to it because they feel safe. They feel like I can get out there really quickly. So that's kind of the area you have to be in, really high alert if you're going to use those zones. And ride the line. I always ride right on the line, so even if they open their door the whole way, they won't clip my handle. And I've hopefully got enough time to slow down and have a quick friendly chat about them, about their need to check. And when I say that, I genuinely mean that. When I talk to people about what they've just done wrong, I try to remove any frustration I might have out of my voice and just say to them, what's going on here? And I say, I understand why this happens, but this is why it's really important for you to always check no matter where you are when you're opening your door. And I also talk to them about the Dutch reach. You had a drawing up before, but the Dutch reach is if you're in a car on the driver's side, especially older makes in Australia, you'd open the door here and open it out and then you'd get out of your car. Most European vehicles, they don't have the latch to open the car up the front of the door. It's actually further back on the door, and this is intentional to make it harder for you to open with this hand and make it easier to reach across your body. Because if you reach across your body to open a door, it's easier for you to look back and check. And so it was made basically European law, that the placement of it, to make it easier for people to exit a vehicle in a way which would help them check to see if there's something behind them. So I highly encourage you to do it. I'm teaching my partner how to drive at the moment, and I'm really on her whenever she gets out to reach across, look in the mirror first to see anything, and then also look over his shoulder and then slowly open a door. Not everyone's going to do that for you, but when you're being the driver instead of the cyclist, do that. And tell your friends to do that too and why it's there, so you've got more people out there not making a mistake in the future.
And I put a link to an article about the Dutch Reach in the email that I sent. If you're going to Google Dutch Reach, make sure you put cycling as well, because you might get some stuff that you're not really happy about seeing.
Yeah, so there's a few other. So we've talked about door zone, fake bike lanes. There's bad transitions. So sometimes you will actually have a bit of cycle infrastructure which is quite good, and then it just pops out into nothing. So just on Day Street here, another really close one, they've put this beautiful green bit of cycling infrastructure, and it just all of a sudden just kind of stops. And then where to now? Are you going to just go straight out facing the wrong direction of traffic? So all I can say is watch out for these. Don't expect the good infrastructure to continue. And if you're regularly riding in, it takes a good few weeks to work out the optimal route where you've got maybe some good infrastructure on the way. You figured out the little spots which are a bit funny. So just slowly work out your route. And if you're just having trouble, there's plenty of us cyclists here too who will happily ride with you home on the way home and help you figure out a better route, or tell you the routes that we've figured out to help you get there as well. Oh yeah, and potholes is another one. This is also why it's really important to ride a bit out from a car door zone. You want to be in a position which is making car drivers give you space, because sometimes you're going to hit things on the road, potholes, glass, other obstacles which you're going to have to go around, and you're not going to get much time to see them coming. And that's where being out and having the car drivers already giving you room means if you actually have to go into the lane of traffic a bit, which you sometimes might, they've already given you that room, or you can go back in towards the car door zone if you need to. But if you are in that car door zone, the cars might already be hugging the line and you've got nowhere to go. So it's really important you do that. So, sorry, unconfident riding style. So we touched on being in close to car doors and that being not a good idea. Another thing I routinely see with people who aren't riding much and are a bit scared is not only will they ride near the car doors, but wherever there's a gap, they'll go in where there's no cars parked and they'll weave out again and weave in and weave out. And you want to maintain your line out somewhat in the flow of traffic, so you're giving car drivers plenty of time to see you there. The more you weave out and out of their line of view, you might feel like you're getting out of the way for them, but you're actually just making it so people can't see you. So your lack of confidence actually makes it more dangerous for you. So you need to do a bit more riding where you get into that better position. And if you're struggling with that, once again, we're quite happy to come out for some rides with you and show you how to do that, and show you how much car drivers give you space and give you time if you take a better spot and indicate, and they actually make it feel a lot safer to ride as well. Okay, riding on footpaths. On riding on footpaths, New South Wales law says you're not allowed to ride footpaths except where they're shared zones, unless you're riding with a child, and then children are allowed to ride on there too. But there is definitely locations I ride where I feel unsafe riding on the road and I still ride footpaths. And that's often places where there's just no pedestrians as well, because it's such a barren place to be anyway, and it's almost silly that they'd say no riding on the footpath because not many people are going to ride there or walk there. But sometimes you just need to make a call about your safety, and you need to be prepared if I'm riding up on a footpath that maybe a police officer comes and says you're not allowed to ride there, why are you doing that? And you say, I felt unsafe on the road, this is why I chose to do it. And police officers have discretion and they rarely pull someone up for that. They'll pull you up if you're endangering someone else on a footpath, but if you're doing the right thing and being respectful to other people, slowing down for them, giving people plenty of space, I've never heard of any incidences out of all my cycling friends where they've ever been fined for riding on a footpath when they were just doing for their own safety and respecting the other people around them. So make use of them when you need to, because we want to survive our ride every day along the way. And the City of Sydney is great because they've started putting down stencil things, these big blue circles saying stay below, I think, about 10 and shared zone in heaps of intersections, and making it legitimate for us to use those footpaths as well. Mobile phones, headphones and other distractions, just don't do it. I know, especially if you're doing a bit of a longer ride, it's nice to have a bit of music in the background. You might be used to it in the gym. A bit of exercise music helps you not worry about the pain of riding or anything like that. But your eyes is one set of senses you're using to figure out what's going on, but they don't look backwards. Your ears look backwards for you and to the side as well. You want to have all your senses available to you when you're riding, so just avoid using a phone. And also, it's been in the paper recently around mobile phones. You're just like a motorist. You're not allowed to use a mobile phone whilst driving or piloting your vehicle, your bike, and you'll be fined very heavily, just like a car driver will. So the rule is you need to have dismounted your bike, which means fully gotten off it in New South Wales. But in practice, from what I've read, if you've pulled over out of the lane of flowing traffic and have put a foot down, police aren't going to fine you because you've clearly stopped riding your bike to do it. But the rule is you need to have dismounted. So if you want to be completely careful, you can get off the bike. And for car drivers, it's really important for you to know if you need to take a call and it rings in your car and you don't have the hands-free kit or the legally means available to you to do it whilst in the car, you can't just pull over. You most definitely can't use it at lights, and you can't just pull over and put the blinker on. You need to have completely turned off the ignition to your vehicle to use a mobile phone, or you can be charged for using a mobile phone too. So it's not harder for cyclists, it's the same for cars too. And the reason for that is when they do the stats, using a phone is basically as dangerous as being a drunk driver in terms of your level of ability to understand what's going on around you. They're really dangerous. So yes, we've got this Pavlovian response. Someone wants me, needs me, I better answer right now. But train yourself. Phone goes into silent when I get into a car, or goes into silent on the bike, or if I am going to pick it up, I'm completely pulling over and stopping what I'm doing and taking the phone call. That's the only time we're using them.
I would just skip the next slide because it's rules, which you've already talked about.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so this reporting issues is a good one.
Yeah.
So, we're lucky in Australia in terms of having a pretty heavy amount of infrastructure, and there's actually good support from council, state and national level in terms of our road infrastructure at least, to keep things clean and fix things and keep our traffic signalling working and fix potholes and everything. And often the barrier to something getting fixed is just that someone doesn't know about it yet. So there's a really good app you can get on your mobile phone called Snap Send Solve. And it's a little app that'll allow you to take a photo of the issue, and then it'll, if you give it permission, it'll use the GPS to figure out where you are, and it'll figure out from your position which council is the relevant council to send the email to. And it'll give you some little things, what's the type of hazard, where is it, all that kind of stuff. And it'll basically populate an email for you, and at the end of the process it'll have the email made with the attachment done, go to the right person, you send it. And speaking to friends I've got who work in council, they love that application. They even get their council workers to use it when they're out doing inspections, because it gets it well documented with a location. And the council rules are, if someone makes a request, they have to generate a job number that needs to be actioned. So basically this is a way that you ensure that the hazard you've seen will be actioned, and it'll be actioned reasonably quickly if it's a reasonably high risk. And I've found when I've done it, it has gotten good responses. So download that on your phone, Snap Send Solve, and start making use of it, and make use of it for just when you're walking around and you see something that needs fixing too, and you'll be surprised how quickly things will get fixed if you use that.
So we've only got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So we had sort of planned to talk about common situations and address what a safe cycling technique might be in various typical situations. And then I had a couple of other things. But does anyone have any questions or want to raise a discussion at this point?
My housemate recently had the incident that someone actually opened the door, crashed into the door, and now that person, it seemed she was really like apologetic and cared, but now she doesn't want to have anything to do with it anymore.
Yeah.
So how do you go about a thing like that?
Right. So the question is
okay. Yeah.
for the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But I'll just say it into the microphone for the recording. So the question is, if you are involved in an incident which potentially results in an injury to you, how do you deal with the follow-up if the person that caused the injury is not actually interested in?
Well, how do you deal with it in the first place? What's the best
Right,
way to
right.
do it in the first place
Exactly.
to actually prevent
What do you
that
do
from
on the scene to
What's
address
the
it?
best thing to do when actually an incident happens?
Yeah.
But
first thing to remember is if you've just had an accident, you'll have an adrenaline rush and you might be in a bit of shock anyway. So you might feel like I feel okay, and you're a bit flustered and it's a bit embarrassing, and so you might just want to keep going. Just know that that's going to happen for you, and then from there, it's like any accident with a car, with another car. They are required to exchange details with you, and if the expense of the accident is more than $500, the police need to be called. And $500 might sound like a lot when it comes to a bike, but I've had incidents where cars have hit me, and I've easily racked up $1,200 in repairs on a bike very quickly. So know that they're required to exchange details with you, and you just want to try and say, I don't think I'm injured, but we're required to exchange details anyway in case it turns out there's damage or injury I didn't know about. So can I please have your details? I'm happy to provide mine as well. And then the discussion I've often had is, if it's not a big one where you don't need to call the police, I've often said to them, okay, this is what I'm doing from here. I'm going to take my bike directly to the bike shop, and I'm going to get it inspected for damage and quoted for repair, and I'll send you the quote, and if you get that repaired off that quote, I'll consider the matter closed, but I'm happy for you to seek further quotes if you think it's overly expensive. And I've done that several times, and it's been resolved that way. But the other important thing to note is, as far as cyclist incidents go, if the police come along, if you're not going off to hospital, they don't feel like it's too bad, and there's other important things for them to do, and they often just want to say, okay, no, it's not too bad, we won't press any charges or anything. But the problem with doing that is none of the incidents make the statistics, and we don't realise what's going on. So you're actually helping future cyclists if you have an incident and reporting it. And the key phrase you want to use is, with a police officer, is, I'd like to make a statement and I'm prepared to testify in court. Because that tells them you're not wasting their time. You actually want to make a statement about what's happened and you're prepared to testify. And then they'll take what you're saying seriously because you're telling them, I consider this a serious situation and I want you to go through the correct process. And so I'd like a copy of the police report too. You can request that as well. But generally start with exchanging of details, and from the word go, telling someone that you expect them to do what they're required to do.
But what if they deny responsibility? I mean, you usually have nothing, right?
Yeah, well, that's where, if they're going to deny responsibility, that's where you are best placed. If in the incident themselves they're trying to do that, that's when I'd be just going to the nearest police station and saying that same thing. I'd like to make a statement, I'm prepared to testify in court. And if they've refused to give you details, their contact details, you want to take their registration and say, this person, after an incident, failed to give me details when I requested them. Here's their rego. And that's an offence, and I'll be followed up for that as well. So you've got to start by realising you've got this shock and just try and be respectful but clear in what you want to do. Say, we've had an accident, we're required by law to exchange details, and and in the event of being more than $500, we've got to call the police with this. And if they say, oh, go away, or if they just want to drive off, say to them, I understand you don't want to deal with this, but you're required to by law. If you drive off now, I'm going to have to go to the nearest police station and make a statement. And that's about the best you can do, but keep it calm. Don't let off your aggression too much at them. You know, I find it hard to do too sometimes if something happens. But just try and be factual about what's going on next, dictate what's going to happen next, and you've got a much better chance of getting a good outcome.
Well, Anastasia dropped her pen loudly on the table, so I think that means that we're supposed to wrap up now. So thank you for the signal, Anastasia. Thank you. We do have there's a couple more slides that I think have useful information, but I'll distribute this, and Rob will also put this on the website. Well, of course, anyone who wants to stay, we're happy to stand and chat about bikes all day.
Yeah.
So if you need to leave, we won't take any offense.
Yeah, we'll keep rambling and just filter out as you get annoyed with us talking.
Yeah.
Bike route wise, it's way better now than it was even 5 years ago in terms of picking out a bike route. Google Maps now has the ability to click on a bicycle option. It's not perfect at picking out the best bicycle routes, but it's far better than going the route it would send a car, that's for sure. There's also several other resources. So we've got the Bikely, or now Bike Radar routes, where that was an independent project where they mapped all the more bicycle-friendly areas, and they had kind of heat zones, different colours for what was better as well for cycling.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And then the Sydney Cycleways also have some maps. So between those three, you can really pick out some good routes if you just spend maybe 10 minutes at your computer if you're trying to get somewhere. And then failing that, as I said, Craig and myself are a resource, and so are many of the other riders, and we've got riders going in different directions, so we're happy to help you find the better routes, and also do a bit of a bike train where we help you do it for a while before so you can build up some confidence along the way. So that's that. So this bike, I do want to show this bike security video. This is a really good one. I see it all the time when I'm walking past how people have locked up their bikes. If you're using a cable lock, it's like putting a ribbon around your bike saying Merry Christmas to a bike thief, basically, and you'll see why. Oh, we've got to get the sound up.
Now the sound doesn't want to work. I muted it.
Industry experts have Bike to carry out a bike lock test and to promote standards of best practice when leaving your bike unattended. In order to do that, we need a thief. Here's Darren. So what is the most common type of bike
Listen,
then?
it's Mike Pollard.
The easiest bike food for me is to use a pair of cutters like this. I can show you how quick that is.
So that's how quickly they're stealing your
That
bike
was
outside
about
if you're using a
3
cable
locks
lock.
in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much money people will leave attached to cable like that.
So what would be the next step up from the cable locks?
Next step, the D-locks, they come in varying quality and size, slightly bigger tool for the job.
Bam!
It looked like you were slightly struggling there, but it did actually only take you 4 seconds with those bolt proppers to get through that U-lock.
We do always have these, which is probably half the time.
But would people actually be seen walking around with a massive pair of bolt proppers like that?
Yep, surprisingly, these are used very regular.
Well, that was a pretty cheap U-lock that you've just broken into there, and now we've got this bling, shiny, hefty looking chain. So surely that's going to take a lot longer to get into.
This is a good quality, toughened chain, but I don't think it's going to take very long. Probably best to stand back just a touch. This generally will be cut twice.
No, there you have it, 11 seconds. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our Sold Secure gold-rated locks for bicycles. Are you going to give it a go with these bolt proppers?
Yeah, we'll try it with the bolt proppers. Don't think that one's going to work. This is our last option.
All right, I mean, that was pretty extreme. Do people actually walk around with these angle grinders?
Yeah, again, they can be hidden quite well. They're quite small, compact, and they are used in the middle of the day.
Really, with people walking around?
Yep, who's going to stop me with one of these?
Yeah, I wouldn't go near anybody with one of those.
I'll speed this up because he just chops through heaps.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything that you can do to help protect your bike?
So the point I want to make here is you cannot get a lock which can't be defeated quite quickly if someone's wanting to use an angle grinder on it. Some of the more expensive D-locks will survive a big set of bolt cutters, as you saw there. And so that's the kind of style I use. And they're saying if you have it locked down where you're filling a lot of the lock with material of the bike, it's much harder for them to angle grind without causing damage and other things. It slows it down. So the trick with securing your bike is make it annoying for them so they don't bother, because they're going to have to spend time, expose themselves, potentially have someone spotting them when they're doing it. I really regularly see just outside here people just putting a cable lock just around their front wheel. And even me as not a bike thief, I could be off with their bike in about 10 seconds because I'll just release their quick release and go away. If you're not putting it through at least the frame, your bike's gone. It's to the point where I could have undone one's front wheel and taken front wheel off someone else's bike and ridden away in about 20 seconds out of the way some people secure. So if you want to keep your bike, get a better quality D-lock, because you might spend $500 on a bike. Don't then buy a $20 lock. Get the ones which they have a sign that says sold gold rated secure. So they're the ones which basically you can't defeat with the bolt cutters. You have to use an angle grinder. They're the best ones to go for. And then try and get it through the frame and a wheel if possible. And if you've got quick release wheels, if you don't have a lock through it, it's gone basically.
Yep.
So I tend to secure mine through this area here, and I've got quick release on the back, but I know it's a bit more work, and so because of the convenience factor, I just don't do that. But
Yep.
the good thing about at work is if you're riding here every day, you can leave several locks here that you don't have to carry every day. I leave one lock here all the time. You could even leave several that you just lock up with that way as well.
Yeah, I think a good principle in general, not necessarily when you're just riding to work, is to try to lock up near other bikes, because there's safety in numbers to some extent. The more bikes you're around, the less likely it is that yours is going to get targeted. And if yours is more difficult to steal than the one next to it, if there's a reasonable comparison between the two bikes, then the thief is going to go for the easier one to steal, so the lowest hanging fruit.
There's a few good ones out now which are either a D-lock or a braid, which is hard to bolt cut, which actually have a movement sensor on it too, which will alarm quite loudly.
Yeah.
So they're probably your highest level of protection because they're going to make so much noise it's really obvious something's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then another form of security, of course, is just dealing with malfunctioning bike or small incidents of damage. So it's really worth it to carry a small repair kit for the most common types of things that may occur on a ride. So dealing with flat tires is every cyclist's bugbear, the thing that annoys us most probably. If you happen to realize that one part of your, one of your components is loose or something like that, it's good to have a little wrench, spanner kit, something like that, a multi-tool to deal with that. You may find that something is misaligned that you want to deal with, and other things might need adjusting from time to time. So you can actually get a repair kit for a very reasonable price that's going to help with most of these main things. It's not like having a proper workshop in your backpack, though.
Do you lock your saddle?
I don't lock my saddle, but my saddle and Mark's are both attached with a spanner with a bolt. So you can see that some cyclists have a quick release saddle, which I think is meant to encourage people to take their saddle with them, not to leave it so that it's really easy for a thief to steal. However, no one takes their saddle off their bike and puts it back every day, partly because you are not going to put it back in the right spot every time. Yeah. So I would really encourage, if you do have a quick release saddle, or really any other quick release parts, unless you're putting your bike into a car on a regular basis, to exchange them for what are called security locks, where it's essentially a bolt with a special type of head. So like a 5-sided spanner instead of a typical hex wrench. So it's very unlikely that someone who's not prepared is going to be able to steal those parts off of your bike. So both of my wheels are secured with security skewers, for example.
On flat tyres, it's really common when I talk to people who have had a bit of a go of riding. Yeah, I was riding, but I got a flat tyre. I've got to get it fixed. How long's it been since you rode? 3 months. And for me, as a regular cyclist, I just can't believe it, because for me, once I've practiced and learnt how to do it, a flat tyre is a 10-minute fix, and then I'm back on the road again. So that I don't want to belittle the fact that there's some difficulties with learning how to do it, but I've helped heaps of people here change a tyre, and every time I don't change the tyre for them, I say, this is how we change a tyre. Maybe I'll do it, undo it, and then get them to do it. So if you've got a flat that's holding you back, just come up and see me or speak to Craig, and we'll give you the little demo on how to change tyres so that you can do it quickly and easily and get it done. Because there's a few little tricks which make it from lever braking exercise to a really quick fix thing. So yeah, come and see us if you want a bit of a tutorial on how to do that.
That's right. That's actually all we've got for the presentation. I just put this in here. This is Mark's. Mark, maybe you can explain what this is, Mark.
Yeah, this is kind of one of my favourite photos of something I saw on the side of the road. This is in Colombia. I was over in Colombia for a month, staying with a family and learning Spanish, and I was riding over this big mountain pass every day. And along the way, there's this really worn-out looking sign. You can hardly read what it's saying, but it's saying, "Protejo puede ser su hijo," which means take care, it could be your son. And what I love about this is it's not just a sign saying take care, it could be your son. It's a sign that's been there so long, it's faded, and it's been the sentiment in Colombia for years and years and years. And that's just the sentiment for cyclists there the whole time. So I just wanted to share it with you because it always made me feel good every time I rode past that faded sign when I was riding there. Yeah,
so whether you're a cyclist or interested in cycling or just a motorist that wants to look out for cyclists, I hope that the spirit of this message goes with you today, and that we've provided some tips that might be helpful in helping you be a bit more aware about road safety with respect to cycling. So thank you all for attending today. We're always up for a chat about cycling. If you need some help fixing your bike or whatever, we've probably got the tools on hand. And I know that's true of quite a few other people here as well. So we appreciate your attention, and thank you very much.